This is Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net with a look at the astrology of the indictment of a former president of the United States on 37 charges of espionage and obstruction of justice in connection with documents. I'm going to look at a number of charts. The upshot is they show, no surprise, this is a monumental moment, not just in our nation's history, but in the life of the accused and also in the life of the special prosecutor who brought the charges to a grand jury that issued the indictment. So we're going to start with a look at the chart of when Donald Trump issued a statement that he had been indicted on the evening of June 8th. The official word didn't come till somewhat later, but we're going to start with this because there's a bunch of stuff that ends up being really important. The sun, please take note, is of the degree in Gemini, 17 Gemini, in the house of allies and open enemies. The moon at the time of this announcement in the third house of communication, which also deals with papers, is in Aquarius, sign of the people. This is a marker for papers that belong to the people. The argument could be made. Let's look at where Saturn is. Saturn in the house of communications and papers. Saturn, responsibility, accountability, the government, reckoning, karma, enforcement at 7 Pisces. This is important for a number of reasons. So not only is it in the house that would represent the documents, but it's in the sign of self-undoing. Just keep that in mind. And Saturn is sitting at a degree that's going to end up being in play for a very long time. This is as far as Saturn gets in the sign of Pisces during 2023. It sits at 7 Pisces from June 2nd until July 3rd. And then it comes back in February. So that's an indicator of one possible timing arc in all of this. Also note that Pluto retrograde at 0 degrees Aquarius in the second house of resources, property, money. Pluto will return to this degree in January. So it's sitting there, it stays there until June 11th. So it's going to change signs as this saga progresses. A lot more going on, but these are the things I want to draw your attention to initially. So now let's look at what the indictment does to the US chart. And notice that the sun is in the house of allies and open enemies. The moon in the announcement chart is conjunct. That's crappy. Sorry about that. Look, the moon is in Aquarius, really close to the US moon in Aquarius. So this affects and engages the collective as a whole. Saturn, come on, buddy boy, here he is. Saturn in the third house of the US chart is trine in an easy flow with the US sun. So this is a limiting or protecting or enforcing action that has to do with the security of the US, Cancer, and importantly, Mars. Notice that Mars in the 8th house of joint resources. It's a house of corruption and criminality. It also has to do with other people's money and investments. Mars has just moved off the US North Node, the direction in which we are supposed to head. And Venus and Mars are basically sandwiching that node. So Venus values, Mars action, sandwiching the direction that this country is headed for and what it wants to do. And that Mars at 11 Leo is in a sextile to Saturn in Libra in the 10th house. Mars action, taking aggressive action, fighting for, attacking, is in an opportunity aspect with the planet of consequences and laws in the sign of laws and also the courts. So this fits. Okay, what is this indictment doing to Trump's chart? Well, looky here, the sun at 17 Gemini, exactly on his Uranus at 17 Gemini. Uranus is a planet of disruption, of radical change, of going rogue, of going your own way and not following the rules, of shaking things up, of being a disruptor. The sun on that, light coming to what he has done, and it's all very, very public with the sun up there in his 10th house of public reputation. Also note what's happening with the moon in the arraignment chart here at 23. I'm sorry, in the indictment announcement chart. The moon is in an adjustment aspect or an inconjunct to his conjunction of Saturn and Venus in Cancer in the 11th house. This is an interesting signature. Saturn and Venus in Cancer. This indicates money from family. He inherited his start from his dad, money with his children, having an organization that is very family oriented. But this is also the House of Congress and other organizations. So there is something here about what his dealings were with others and the interests of the people. The moon in Aquarius in the house of details, causing some tilting in all of how this will go on. Let's look at Mars in his 12th house of hidden matters, self-undoing. Mars has just moved off a conjunction with his Pluto in Leo. Pluto is a lot to do with power, and in the 12th house, this is power games, behind the scenes machinations. This is also a house of self-undoing. It's a house of criminality. So Mars going across that is someone taking bold action against all of this. And the conjunction happened a day or two before this indictment was announced. And notice again that Venus and Mars are straddling, they're sandwiching, they're operating together, sandwiching that Pluto, and that Venus will very shortly be moving across it. Venus is the lower money planet. It's also a lot of what we value. Also important to notice Saturn in the 7th house of allies and open enemies, limitations, responsibility, karma, consequences, accountability. This year, actually since March, Saturn has already once been in an adjustment aspect to Trump's Neptune in Libra in his second house. Neptune in Libra in second house. This is the art of the deal. This is a talent and ability, a means of making money from agreements with or arrangements with other people. With Neptune there, all is not as it seems. We could sit here for a long time going through all of the various things that are actually verifiable instances of fraud in his past that he has used for raising money. Some say grifting. Trump University, you can just keep going. There's quite a long list. So Saturn has required some kind of adjustment in that already once this year. As Saturn retrogrades, which it will on the 17th, it's going to move into another in conjunct with that Neptune, and then again early next year cause it again. So things that have been coming to light in the past, I'm going to say early May or so, will come back again and come back again. And whatever is going on right now in this indictment has beats that we will be able to see play out as Saturn goes back into that inconjunct. Also, that Saturn at 7 Pisces is in a trine or an easy flow to Trump's Mercury in Cancer. It's not going to actually make the trine exact until early next year, another marker, but this has been a flow of information. Mercury has to do with papers that have been found in his home, Cancer. And as Saturn goes back into a trine, or actually completes a trine, and Saturn's movement in this has brought papers at home. And again, also water. There's news that the pool at Mar-a-Lago in his home was drained, and that part of the building got flooded where computers were, maybe hard drives, other documents. All of this fits the astrology with Saturn in Pisces, the water obscuring the documents, destroying the documents. And there's a question with this of, was it an accident or deliberate? The Piscean, Neptunian aspect to this would definitely raise that question. Also, it's important, this is indicating that the information that has come to light that led to the indictment is from people who are in his extended family with the Cancer, from people who are familiar with him. And the final thing I want to point out is that Uranus and Mercury, although not really tightly together, are sandwiching his midheaven, the doorway to his public reputation, the doorway to his career, tangible evidence, tangible documents, tangible information, possibly with ultimately money aspects to them that have an impact on his public reputation, which will be his ability to actually maintain his campaign for the presidency. That will be impacted by it. All right, now we have a new person who has entered the picture, and only this week has birth data become publicly available for the prosecutor who spearheaded the investigations and made the first public statement about them, Jack Smith. We don't have a birth time for him, so I have a solar chart here. He is a Gemini. His sun is at 14 Gemini. Does that degree sound familiar? Keep it in mind. So ruled by Mercury, highly mental, highly intellectual, and that same thing goes for his Emotions, we don't know his exact moon degree, but odds are it's in Aquarius. The moon didn't change signs until really, really late in the evening. And moon in Aquarius would be appropriate for other reasons that will become clear, but this would add to an intellectual, dispassionate, doing something for the greater good. This is a man who has worked at The Hague and has prosecuted war criminals. This seems to fit other things that we know about him. Notice that he has this massive pile up in Virgo. Virgo is also ruled by Mercury, same as his sun. In this, he has loosely a marker, a change agent marker that people born in most of them are a couple of years earlier in the 60s, but there was a stretch of time in the 1960s when Uranus in Virgo and Pluto in Virgo were conjunct, creating a subset of Gen Xers who were wired to be change agents, and aspects between Uranus and Pluto from 2012 to 2015 activated the programming and pushed people into motion. The conjunction isn't exact in his chart, but other things connect it. And the fact that Jupiter is in the middle of the mix means this guy is a God is in the details person, and he can really, really, really analyze things. This is incredible discernment, critical thinking, and it's his default approach with a South Node in Virgo. And he goes at things to find out what was really going on. So this is part of his effectiveness as a prosecutor. Now, this is all, as I've mentioned, really intellectual energy, but he does have firepower and a fighter vibe. His Venus is at the very end of Aries, which is fighting like crazy for things that he values. There is a fearlessness and a ferocity that comes with this. Also, this was activated, kicked into motion earlier this year when we had a solar eclipse in April. The new moon in April was at 29 degrees Aries, right on his Venus, and set in motion what is going to be a 2-year trajectory for him in working with organizations. It booted him out of what he was doing at The Hague and brought him back into something else, back on his home turf. They're not connected by aspect, but his Mars is also fiery. He has Mars in Sagittarius. This could be fighting for something that matches your beliefs. It has an international streak to it, which fits someone who's been prosecuting war crimes. And this is another indicator of the fighter vibe that he has. And the one other thing I want to point out is Neptune at 26 Scorpio is exactly trying his North Node of 26 Pisces. So there is almost like a messianic streak in this. I'm not saying he thinks he's God, but there is a very natural impulse of calling, of doing things for a higher purpose, of being guided to do something that is going to benefit huge amounts of people. And with Pisces being part of his North Node of destiny, possibly people who have been victimized, which would fit with the war crimes prosecutions. Okay, so let's look at what his connection with the announcement that Trump made, notice that his sun is in the seventh house of open enemies. This is the announcement. This is not Trump's chart in the center. This is the announcement of the indictment. And his sun is conjunct. So he is in alignment with, which of course makes sense, this announcement. Notice also that his moon, unless he was born really, really late at night, is conjunct the moon of the announcement. So this puts him in line with, and it's in the house that deals with papers, the people's papers, house of communication. His Mars, how he pushes himself forward, what he does, his fighting for justice is in the first house. So like the very identity of this announcement, the identity of the existence of these indictments, he is the driving force, and he is now in the public eye with this announcement. His own Mercury, his own communication, his mental facilities are conjunct the seventh house cusp of the announcement. So he's coming to the fore in dealing with allies and open enemies. His Saturn, come here, Saturn, at 4 degrees Taurus is conjunct Jupiter at 5 Taurus. So there's a stabilizing enforcer, putting the rules in place, demanding tangible accountability from this. Note also that his Saturn it's close enough to be conjunct the North Node, the importance, the role that this indictment plays, and his Venus, his values, and his basic fighter mode also right on top of the North Node. Let's look at all of his Virgo. I'm going to analyze this to death, is in the very public 10th house. So this has brought a lot of what he has been up to out into the open, into the public eye. And his Neptune, still in there, is trine the Neptune of the announcement of the indictments. So he's a part of this, even though that announcement was made from a home, that was the 4th house, from the home in Bedminster. But this also, with his natal Neptune being trine, transiting Neptune, and his North Node being on top of that transiting Neptune, this gives a sense of calling, of savior, of people, idolizing him, or there's still more that's been going on with that Neptune in the 12th house than we've seen. Now, I put this up just to look at very briefly. This is when he actually appeared and we saw him for the first time, and he made the appearance at the presser, and he spoke for exactly 3 minutes. Notice the degree of the ascendant, 13 Libra. Now, he was supposed to talk straight up on the hour, and he came out a few minutes later. And so I ran the chart for roughly when I think it might have been 1 degree later. It might have actually been when the ascendant was at 14 Libra, a degree that we have already spoken about. That's the degree of the US Saturn in Libra, which we'll see in a second. The sun is at 14 Gemini. His sun is trine the ascendant. So He just sort of effortlessly and it's in the ninth house of legal matters and the courts. And so he comes out, bam, he brings this issue to light. He basically births it. All of his Virgo is still very, 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 very much behind the scenes. So there's a lot more that we don't know or that has not been revealed. All right. So here we have what you're all curious about, which is his interaction with Trump. His 14-degree Gemini sun is pretty close to Trump's Uranus, so his way of he's very public. It's a public role with it being in Trump's 10th house. So he is shedding light on talking about all of the various things that Uranus can represent. His Venus in Aries is in the ninth house of legal matters, also foreign matters. Keep that in mind. And it is trine in a very, very easy flow, fanning the flames involving Trump's Mars, how he puts himself out, and his ascendant. So he's attacking, absolutely going at how Trump has presented himself. And this is not something, I mean, not that this individual is known for ignoring things, but you will see that Trump has been not hesitant to attack the prosecutor who is at the top of these serious charges, and also the prosecutor's wife, Venus in Aries. The moon, let's see what's going on with the moon. So his moon, come here. Why am I not seeing it? Unless it's really, really late at night, his moon is trine Trump's sun north node in Gemini, and it's in an opportunity or companionable aspect to Trump's moon in the sign of foreign matters. Okay, so this will give Smith an ability to light up, deal with, again, it's details because it's in the Virgo house, even though it's the sign of Aquarius. Assuming he's born close to noon, his moon is in an adjustment aspect to that interesting signature of Saturn and Venus in Cancer in the 11th house, which makes me wonder if ultimately there isn't a feature of what Smith is investigating that will involve not just family members, not just deals with things that at various properties that Trump uses as his home, but also Congress, because the 11th house is the house of Congress. The Mars in Sagittarius, Smith's Mars in Sagittarius is trine Trump's 12th house Pluto in Leo, which transiting Mars has just gone over, kind of adds to the firepower of what Smith has just birthed or brought to light here, or facilitated, whatever verb you want to use. Okay, so here's a chart for the arraignment, which is scheduled to happen on the day when I am recording this. The time may end up being just a little bit later, but do notice the ascendant is at 14 Libra. The DOJ presser was at 13 or 14 Libra. This is a natural outgrowth of the first public appearance that Jack Smith made announcing the existence of the indictment. The sun at the arraignment is in the ninth house of legal matters, the courts, international dealings, and it's in the sign that deals with communication and documents, which is what this case is about. Documents. Notice that there is a packed seventh house in the arraignment chart. The seventh house is the house of allies and open enemies. Allies, the information that led to the indictments has all come from people who work with or worked with Trump, especially his attorneys. And it's tangible evidence with all of that Taurus sitting there, the moon, the north node, and Jupiter. So it's tangible. There's something here about comfort, security, and with that Taurus in place, this isn't going to just evaporate. These charges have longevity, staying power, tenacity to them. Pluto in the fourth house of homeland and security. Pluto at this point has retrograded back into Capricorn. It was at this degree at the beginning of 2023. It's going to sit here into July, nearly the end of July, and it returns again at the end of the year until it goes back into Aquarius in January, and then later in 2024, it comes back for one final sweep through Capricorn, having to do with the failure of institutions, rot, corruption, deconstruction, all kinds of things that we've been seeing. And so the fact that this has happened at the time of the arraignment, that Pluto has scooched back to this spot, gives us an indicator of some of the beats again, like a lot of stuff until early July, and then more at the end of the year and into early next year, and then some more next summer. Very likely there will be developments in this case that follow that kind of timetable. And the same is true of what Saturn is up to. Saturn is sitting at 7 degrees Pisces, where it will remain until early July, and it'll be back there in February. And by then, it's going to have this nice little handshake with Jupiter and Taurus. And at this point, Saturn is in an adjustment aspect to Venus in the 10th house. So this is causing a lot of people to rethink their values and to make adjustments in how they're going about things. We will be seeing that part of it in particular playing out over this longer period of time as well. So notice that these two outer planets are both indicating that there are aspects to this particular proceeding that have beats coming in months. All right. So it's going to take a while. It always does. But we can foresee when some of this is going to get moving. All right. What does this indictment mean for the United States? Well, I've put it at first, just really briefly to show you, because of the way my program works, I have the arraignment in the inner wheel and the U.S. Declaration of Independence chart on the outer wheel. And oh, looky here, the planet that represents our justice system, Saturn in Libra, is exactly on the ascendant of the indictment. So this is really stabilizing, putting a stamp on it. Notice also that there is a pileup here in the 9th house of legal proceedings, the courts, and foreign matters. In Mars, let's clear this up, make it easier to see. Mars in the U.S. chart is conjunct the sun in the arraignment chart. We've just had we're in the middle of our Chiron return. We've just had it. So big issues here about independent action, executive action, just what is okay for someone to do, because we've got a fairly novel approach to the idea of ownership of government documents that's been suggested here. Notice also that the Venus in the sky at the arraignment, our values, is right smack on the US North Node. That may end up to be very important. And Pluto is heading back to, Pluto retrograde at 29 is heading back to the US Pluto. It will be at 27 again later in the year and give us a final look at what our ground rules are, what we're agreeing to, what our foundations are, what our structures are. All right, now we have the arraignment and the role that Jack Smith is playing in this situation. Again, as we've already seen, his Mars is moving. Well, let's clear this up, make it a little easier to see. His Saturn is on Jupiter, so he's bringing accountability or enforcement or consequences on an expansive action having to do with valuable resources. And his Venus, what his values are when he goes after conjunct that moon and north node. All of his Virgo is behind the scenes. All of that, I'm going to put the details into everything. And I should point out, I meant to say this earlier, the document that he produced is what's called a speaking indictment, and it's really appropriate given that we're dealing with a Gemini sun with this huge pileup of placements in Virgo, both of which are ruled by Mercury. A speaking indictment actually lays out, this happened, then this, then this, then this. It lays out the facts. It doesn't merely say this is what the accused is being accused of, the laws that the accused is being accused of breaking. It says he did this and he did this and he did this and he did this. And this indictment actually even has photographs in it. I will point out, just want to underscore, also his, hold on, where is the moon in the, no. Moon. His moon, if his moon is actually in Aquarius, which is the case unless he was born really late at night, it is trine the sun. So his emotional approach, his action for the masses flows easily and supportively into what the purpose and essentially identity of this arraignment, this arrest is about. And his Mercury, what do I have with Mercury? Yeah, his Mercury and Mercury in the arraignment chart are conjunct. They're both in Gemini. Again, speaking indictment, an indictment with fact, 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 and it's about documents, which is Mercury ruled. It's also about statements that were made regarding documents, also Mercury ruled. And then, of course, what does this arraignment mean for Trump? Well, Venus and Mars are sandwiching his Pluto in the 10th and the 12th house. So we've got this allied values and drive going after or sandwiching, constraining his behind the scenes acts involving power and just things that were hidden, possibly have a lot to do with money. Uranus is moving up on his midheaven. It will actually get there in April next year. So Uranus is in his ninth house of legal matters, the courts, public, international proceedings, international dealings, and all of that other. Taurus is in there too. So he has a packed ninth house, and it's all very slow moving energy if it's Taurus, and it's very here and now. It's not puffery. It's, let me show you this. I can show you it intangible. This is show me the money, give me the evidence, and it is there. Of those, do note that Jupiter is in an opportunity aspect to his Mercury in Cancer. And this is a really long indictment. There's a lot of information and a lot of statements and a lot of physical evidence of what he said and how he handled documents in his Cancer home. This is his birthday chart, essentially. All right. These energies in place at the arraignment mark his solar return because the sun is exactly where it was. This actually happens a little bit later in the day, but all the other placements, the moon will be a couple of degrees later for his birthday chart, but it's basically this. He's going to be living with these energies for the next year plus. This is what his life is about for the next year plus. And what's coming next? Well, Mars right now is in a gauntlet of setting off the eclipses that happened at the beginning of May and at the midterms at the beginning of November last year. Eclipses in the signs of Taurus and Scorpio, money signs, that happened across his third, ninth axis, which has to do with information, with papers, with foreign involvement. And many of these documents are said to involve national security. So watch right now, this week, there's a lot that's going to be setting off levers having to do with things that will come to light connected with the beginning of May and also the time of the midterms. Then Venus, as she moves through the sign of Leo, she's going to spend a lot of time in Trump's 12th house of what he's been doing behind the scenes and self-undoing. She'll be there into the fall, and she goes retrograde July 22nd to September 3rd, and is going to hit that Mars and go back and forth over it, I'm pretty sure 3 times. So more to come out. There will be people coming out of the woodwork. I will not be surprised if more women surface during this time period. Could have to do with money, because Venus does rule money as well. There is an eclipse coming in October that's going to be pretty close to his Jupiter in the second. It's going to be in his third house, but it's going to be pretty close to that Jupiter in the second. And whether it pulls that one in or not, it's going to set something in motion, hitting the reset button in how he communicates, how he gets around, how he travels, and what his messaging is. And it will have a lot to do with information, documents, social media, the reset button being hit. And that particular eclipse is going to have a demand for action, pressuring his signature, his money signature, up there in the 11th house of his relationship with groups. So the group organizations, that's the Trump organization. But it also could be dealings with all kinds of agreements that have a familial quality to them. This coincides with the Trump Organization trial being set for trial in New York State for falsifying, well, for providing one set of figures for insurance purposes and another one for tax purposes for all kinds of assets, which would be organizational assets. That's that Saturn and Venus together. And with the reset button being hit, wham, something happening that really shoots a lot of things into motion. I would say if there is a congressional involvement in any of the stuff going on with him, that will very likely be flushed out around that time as well. I had mentioned that Saturn has been an adjustment aspect to his Neptune. It's got 2 more rounds of that, so possibly more information coming out about things that have not been as they were presented, I guess is the polite way to put it. And then in early February, that Saturn trines, not early, later in February, it's going to trine that Mercury. Mid-February and then through the rest of the month is a really hot time for that. So a lot of things could be fairly conclusive by that point. And then in April, as I mentioned, transiting Uranus moves over his midheaven, and whatever he thinks his role in the world is, it really gets shaken up. So a lot to chew on. Watch how it plays out. Things may have twists and turns. Everything always does, but there's a lot going on in this situation well into next year.